how much of that mindset is a result of media perception? How much of that mindset is a result of music perception? All right? And if you're letting media and music shape your perception of black men, you already in trouble. You already got a problem that needs to be dealt with. All right? So that was supposition number 1. 1B, okay? Because she put this kind of together. She said on average, 52% of African American men are high school dropouts, and black men in their early 30s are nearly twice as likely to have prison records. All right? But here's what she doesn't factor into that. Can a black man be a good man even though he may have a prison record? Yes. I know plenty of them. All right? But we do know that having a prison record makes it harder for a black man in our society to be economically viable, to find a job, right? And so many times the men who do come out of prison, they have to be more entrepreneurial. They might have to start their own business to start earning their economy back, to get themselves some opportunity in this world to earn income, which in a woman's eyes, right, is going to factor into whether or not she chooses him, should he pursue her, because she's going to be asking about this past that could affect his ability to financially provide for a family. All right. Here's something else she doesn't factor into this about black men in their early 30s are nearly twice as likely to have prison records. Well, why are they twice as likely to have prison records? Let's look at our injustice system, right? And how the records show that black men are generally charged for the same crime. They're charged at a harsher sentencing, or they're actually arrested for the same crime that maybe someone in another people group has committed, and they don't get the harsh sentence. So there is a reasoning behind why black men are nearly twice as likely to have a prison record. But she does not talk about that, okay? So that I want to bring some balance to what she's saying. Here's the other piece she says about they're twice as likely to have prison records than bachelor's degrees. Well, we know now, currently, there are more men in college than there are in prison. She doesn't bring that up here. All right? So if you do the actual research, there are more men being educated, getting educated, than there are men in prison. But you would not think so. Why? Because our culture and our media plays a part in our perception of black men. This is why you have to do your own research and not just go by the images that are continually fed to you about your own people group. I'm preaching good, I know. Here's the second thing she says. Because black women are not incarcerated in the same numbers as black men, many black women will remain unmarried, whether they choose singleness or are single by default. And I've heard people say that many black women will remain single because for the most part we choose to marry within our people group. And therefore, if you're creating a system that is driven by dollars, the prison industrial complex, and driven by systemic racism, if you are incarcerating more black men than you are incarcerating other people groups, and we already know that black women tend to marry within our culture, then yes, it's going to create a community where more black women will remain unmarried. So this is why, if you notice in our media, there has been more of a push for black women to marry outside of their race. So this is all connected. I'm just trying to help you all understand. This is all connected. Okay? So there is a societal push. There is a media mindset that is being pushed into the black community. There's an incarceration problem. And so all of that works together to say to black women, well, you should just go ahead and marry outside your race. And much of this parallels what happened during slavery time. Go back and study how they kept black people from marrying during slavery. Even after some of them were freed, they kept them from getting certain jobs. They were not allowed to own land. They weren't allowed to own a house. So there was lots of economic factors that played a part. Of course they do. Right? So you have to understand, what are the cultural factors that are trying to push you in a certain direction? If you want to marry outside of your race, that's fine. You know, if you find the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with outside of your race, I'm not saying anything's wrong with that. What I'm saying is, understand the cultural factors that are literally pushing you in that direction. That's what I'm saying. Okay? Here's the other one she says. She says the situation is compounded when these women have children outside of marriage. Now here's a question. Are other cultures having children outside of marriage? Yes. We're not the only ones who are having children outside of marriage. But what she's saying is, it becomes even more of a dire situation because of all of these other compounding things that are happening within the black community. Okay? Creating single parent households in which there is no male leadership. Do you know who has a high rate of single parent households that is being taken care of by our government at a rate higher than anyone else? White women. But again, you would have to do research to know that. Why would you have to do research to know that? Because you don't see that pushed on any news channel. You don't see that pushed in any movie. Matter of fact, I think the last show that maybe talked a little bit about it was I think it was a reality show, 16 and Pregnant, where it was beginning to show the white teenage girl. But that was a rarity, and I think that show is off maybe. But even in that show, they didn't portray her as lazy. They didn't portray her as a welfare queen, right? They simply normalized her behavior. I'm just telling you how our media and our culture works, all right? So she says there's no male leadership in these homes. The sons grow up without a strong male role model and often end up being the kinds of men black women call reliable and untrustworthy. Thus, the cycle continues. So, though she has some points in what she's saying, I also wanted to bring some perspective to what she's saying. All right? These are cultural factors, right? These are cultural factors, but we also have to look at systematic factors underlying that culture. How was that culture created? Who's behind creating that culture? Why was that culture created? That's what we also have to deal with, not just looking at the surface. Okay? So I hope I gave you some things to think about, some things to look at, and some things to research. We're going to move into our last section for today, and believe it or not, we're almost done. God has allowed singleness. Remember, this is going to, I'll come back to that question. Make sure you put it up there again. All right. God has allowed singleness. This is going back to some of the things that people have been told, right? Often single women are told that God has allowed singleness and that his knowledge and control over the situation should still any troubled heart. In a sense, singles are chastised for pondering why they are not married. I'm afraid the analysis of the situation is not quite that simple. While cancer is regularly allowed into people's lives, researchers still ask what causes it and tries to work to cure it. We don't tell people with cancer, it's just God's will for you to be sick right now, so you need to be content. It's one thing to trust God's sovereignty in the face of an unknown such as cancer. It's quite another to claim his sovereignty when something's cause is clear. We do not fully know what causes cancer. If we would just open our eyes, we would know what causes the modern phenomenon of protracted singleness. Marriage should be the culmination of our wise choices based on godly wisdom. Marriage is within our control if we would quit shooting ourselves in the foot and embrace the wisdom that has stood the test of time. Of course, marriage is ultimately under God's control, but he demands our thoughtful and participation in our timely participation in his will. While the farmer praises God for a bountiful crop, he must still plant, water, weed, and harvest. While God feeds the birds of the air, he doesn't just drop worms into their nests. They have to go out and search for them. In other words, we must cooperate with God's will for our lives rather than sitting idly by and complaining because God doesn't magically provide. Misunderstanding God's will by having a cultural rather than a biblical mindset has resulted in faulty teaching about singleness. In the following chapter, we will look at some of these specific messages about singleness from a biblical perspective. Are what we've accepted as answers to singleness really answers? And if not, what can we say in response? So we're going to talk about, she's going to talk about the notion of waiting on the Lord. She's going to talk about another one that I've heard lots of singles say, Jesus is all you need. Yeah, so we're going to cover those next Tuesday. And yeah, we'll look at those next Tuesday and Thursday. All right, so we asked the question, what was your question again? How can we get past these things and how can we begin to deal with them? Well, remember, she was writing this 10 years ago. So that's why I said even in some of the things that she's pointed out that are cultural issues, I do see people beginning to step up to the plate and beginning to deal with these issues, right? We have several ministries that have come out. I think there's one called Young and Married with Kids, I believe. And there's another one called Black and Married. There's several different ministries now that have stepped up to the plate to begin to deal with our cultural consequences. Because again, she's talking about you've got to go back to educating black men and women in our culture. You've got to go back to educating them on what the biblical standards are. You've also got to go back to promoting and endorsing marriage as something that God desires. Because for a long time, that was not happening in our communities. It was almost like people stepped away from talking about marriage and marriage ministry and the purpose of marriage and producing healthy families and producing black children. And so as we close, I want to tell you something else. I've talked about this before in another video, but I'm going to add it into this one. All right. There is a number. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it often goes like this. When people say they want to have a family, they'll say something like, I want to have a husband, or I want to have a wife, and I want to have a family with 2.5 kids. I want to have the house. I want to have the picket fence. And that number that people reference, 2.5, is the number that is called, it's the number that ensures that your people group will continue to repopulate in the earth and not become extinct. Okay? So when you see the number 2.5, what they're talking about is the number of people that should be created per family in an ethnicity, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, the four main ones they call it. The number of people that should be reproduced per family in order for your people group not to become extinct. So that's what that number is referring to. All right. I will tell you right now, if you go look up population stats, meaning whose population or whose ethnicity is in danger of extinction, white people are already in extinction numbers. This is why you're seeing the surge of white nationalism and we got to stick to our own. They won't tell you that. But the reality is they are at extinction level. Here's the other people group that's also at extinction level, but they have not been pushed, right, to get your extinction level number back up so that your ethnicity does not become extinct. And that's Black America. People don't realize that. Black America is at extinction level numbers. So if we don't start getting back to this notion of marriage and family and producing children, we could become extinct too, because we're at extinction level numbers. I think the only group right now that is not at extinction level numbers, I just want you to guess who it might be. Who do you think is not at extinction level numbers from the four that I mentioned? And then what's happening in our country will make sense. So you have blacks, you have whites, you have Asians, and you have Hispanics. Which one of those four do you think is not yet at an extinction level? Just take a wild guess. Yes, you're correct. Hispanics, or Latinos really, are not yet at an extinction level. They're still above extinction level. So what does that mean to the United States, who is trying to make sure that their ethnicity does not become extinct? It means get those Latinos out of our country, because we don't want them what? We don't want them mixing with our population. Because if they mix with our population, then that lessens the numbers and causes us to be extinct. Makes sense now, doesn't it? Why they're wanting to kick them all out of the country. So, so again, these levels of extinction matter. People will walk around here and they won't tell the truth. They will act like there's no underlying motive to what they're doing. But the underlying motive is white America wants to procure their population. If you notice, a lot of the white supremacists, they're always talking about what? We don't want these men taking our women. Let's go to another one. Here's another group of people who are not in extinction, but are being banned from coming to our country. Muslims. Guess who are converting to Islam and marrying Muslim men at an accelerated rate? White women. Now it would make sense that we have these immigration policies, because these immigration policies are not just based around a fear of terrorism. It's also based around a fear of genetic annihilation. All right. Last thing I'll say before I close up here today. A man named Father Flanagan, I think that's his name, Fagan, excuse me. Father Fagan, who has been studying the black family for about 40 years now, he said this very powerful statement in truth. He said this. He said, if we do not have black families, in other words, if black men and black women don't come together to produce black children, he said without them doing that, there will be no human race. Think on that. Think on that. He said, without the black family, there is nobody else. Why? Because we are the original DNA. Now, that's not my opinion. That's scientific proof that everyone else comes out of the black family. Every other ethnicity comes out of the black family. So, and he's an Irish guy saying this, that has studied black family and culture for over 40 years, saying to black people, because he told us this in a conference, he told us, he said, if black people don't begin to come together and create more black people, there won't be anybody else, because we are the original DNA. So I want you to think about that as we close for today. Think about the importance of people getting back to what does the Bible say about family? What does it say about marriage? What does it say about the importance of being fruitful and multiplying and replenishing the earth? Right? God is for population. There are plenty of people who are for population control. In other words, getting rid of certain people groups. But God is for population. And so I'm excited. I don't know about you, but I'm excited to see so many black organizations now rising back up to take on this topic, to encourage marriage, to encourage family, to encourage children and child rearing and childbearing. Because for a long time, our community was told it's better for you to abort. And that's a whole other topic. So, until next time, this has been Daring Dialogues. We'll be back on tomorrow with Thinking Thursday, and we will be looking at some prophets, and we'll be having a great time in the Word of God, looking at the prophets of God in the Word of God. I think you're going to enjoy that study. And so we'll be back with Daring Dialogues tomorrow, Thinking Thursday. Friday will be our financial piece. We'll be taking on tools for Titans. And we'll also be back in looking at and reviewing monopolies and how these monopolies got started in the United States. Last Friday, we talked about racial monopolies. And this Friday, I believe that we're going to be covering real estate monopolies and a couple of other financial monopolies. So understanding how money works, understanding how our economy works, so we can be better stewards over what God has given us. Okay, you understand my Jesus picture post now? All right. I hope that you all have learned something today. I hope that you will share it. Share this broadcast so that it winds up in your live news feed. And hopefully we'll get a chance to, again, dive back into this next week. Tuesday and Wednesday we'll be back in the book talking about singleness. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care and God bless.